Here we go. We're gonna see if we are now live. Welcome everyone to the New York Open Center and our live interview series. The New York Open Center was founded in 1984 to be a center of training, research, practice, and gathering for people interested in spiritual practice, holistic health, society, ecology, and creativity. So for 36 years, the Open Center has been serving the New York community in the heart of New York City. And since the pandemic, we've actually been quite blessed that we are now taking all of our programs, bringing them online and sharing them with an international community who can be part of this conversation from any location and any time zone. So welcome very much to our event this evening. And we're really excited because what we are doing is highlighting a very special event, a summit that is happening in January 22nd to 24th, 2021. So save the date. This summit is on a very important subject, talking about chronic pain. And the title of the summit is called Solving Chronic Pain, a New Pathway to Relief. This summit is inviting 21 leading, very distinguished authorities on chronic pain to come together and propose a new way of understanding chronic pain. And at the heart of the message is two things. One is that chronic pain is solvable. It does not have to be something you endure. And number two, that the body itself has in it inner resources that are central to resolving and removing chronic pain forever. So this is a summit that is intended, will be powerful for healthcare practitioners who work with people in pain, but it's also an incredible summit for any one of us who either suffer from chronic pain or know somebody who does. And the insights that'll be shared in the summit will really change the way we look and deal with chronic pain in the future. So CMEs are offered for those professionals who that's important to. And again, we'd just like to invite you to save the date, January 22nd to 24th. All of our information is on our website, the New York, opencenter.org is the URL to the website. So what I have here is such a delight. I have two of the three organizers of this summit, Dr. David Hanscom and Dr. Les Aria. And they come from different parts of the medical field, and together with Dr. Stephen Porges, have been hosting conversations informally and gathering dozens of leading experts weekly in conversations around proposing a new way of dealing with and understanding chronic pain. So the summit that you offer is really that gathering, is an expression of that gathering, wanting to take that conversation and turn it outwards and share it with others and invite people to understand what you're proposing, a whole new way. So my name is Anna, and I wanted to say hello, David, hello, Les, and I wanted to give some proper introductions and context, and then we're gonna kick off with talking about what chronic pain is, talking about your new way of looking at it, and we are gonna close with some Q&A, probably about 30 minutes into the conversation or so, because there are a lot of people with great questions who would like to jump in. So how does that sound? Great. So first, I would like to properly welcome Dr. David Hanscom. He is an orthopedic spine surgeon whose practice focused on patients with failed back surgeries. You proposed a way of working with chronic pain, and what you said to me was that you effectively got yourself out of the business of surgeries because you were helping people relieve their spinal pain so well and so quickly that you became an advocate that maybe spinal pain is not the answer. So you have now changed gears in your profession, and now you do advocacy, teaching, sharing this message of a new way of looking at pain.
Right.
So welcome, David.
Thank you.
And then Dr. Les Aria, you are a rehabilitation and pain psychologist, and you specialize in working with people with complex chronic pain, people who they were told there's no answer for you, there's no solution for you. And you have this very unique style of helping people retrain the mind and then rewire their brain and body and effectively either lessen or remove their chronic pain. So that's pretty spectacular. Now, I also have come to understand that you guys are friends and
Is that
very
true,
warm
Les?
and loving friends.
Yes, it's okay to admit that out in the open, David.
Okay. All right.
So with that, can you let me know, tell me a little bit about how you met and how did an orthopedic spine surgeon and a pain psychologist come together and lead this new conversation?
Much like how chocolate chip cookies are made, right? So how this, David and I always laugh about this. So a couple of years ago, I wanted a program. Some of my patients couldn't come see me from a distance, those who lived past 100 miles. And long story short of that is I found a book that was entitled Back in Control. It's David's book. And I started to assign it. So I read it myself and I said, this guy sounds exactly like me, but he's a surgeon. I thought, all right, so I like what he's doing. He's practicing the way I'm practicing. So I started to assign that to my patients. And when they couldn't work with me because of time constraints, work, family, just barriers to their treatment, I didn't want them to stop healing. And so these were folks who basically, it's pretty much from the medical term, it's fourth down, they're punting to someone. And when they come see me, the patients assume that they're hopeless because now it's all psychological. And that's one of the first stops that David's book and my treatment with patients is, no, it's not in your head. You know, it's in your nervous system, it's in your brain. Assigning David's book, and I had lots of success with patients who couldn't come see me, but were reading David's book, and I was meeting with them with some sense of frequency. Reached out to David, wanted to compliment him, thank you much, and from then on, it's been a friendship ever since then. So,
Wow. David, do you agree?
Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, I get this phone call from this guy, Les Aria, and that's my whole goal is always create a self-directed process because it's such a widespread problem. So my intention always was to write the book, and the combination of the book and the website allows people to do it on their own. And when I can work with people like Les is phenomenal because the book's foundational, gets people started, but when I can work with a pain psychologist, it just takes them a lot farther. So what I found out over the years that the pain psychologist, I was hitting the ceiling, but the pain psychologists who thought the book were hitting the same ceiling. So what the book does, it gives a really strong foundational starting point. Then it allows people like Les to, do what they do really well. Then, of course, what has been fascinating inadvertently to both of us is that we both essentially have the same approach with different styles of it, but we basically have the same approach. Then I met Dr. Stephen Porges about a year ago through a series of events, and I started talking to him on a regular basis. We started realizing that people should listen in on these conversations. And then we started every Wednesday night, I think in April or May, of having a 5 o'clock Pacific time meeting with scientists from all over the world. And so about anywhere from 35 to 45 people come on every Wednesday evening. And Les has been a big part of that. And we just cross-fertilize these different disciplines. And I think what's exciting to both Les and I is that we have I honestly, in the last year, and the other physicians on the group feel the same way, I've learned more in the last year than I've learned in the last 30 years. I mean, it's been a stunning expansion of what we know about chronic pain.
That's great. So your book is called Back in Control.
Right.
Right. Okay. So just to say that for our audience. So you're having these conversations. There are 40, 45 people coming. It sounds like this is a revolution. It's a different way of looking at medicine, a different way of looking at pain. So
Right.
I'd love to get in there, but first, can we lay down the context and have some common ground around what is pain and what is chronic pain and what's the impact that you would say in society around chronic pain?
Yeah, so David, I can take a first stab at it and please add to it. So if you actually look at the definition of, if you Google it, and what pain is not just a physical symptom or something unpleasant. If you actually look at the definition and Google what is the definition of pain, you're going to be very surprised that around the world we've come to agree, and they've changed the definition of it after 41 years. You'll see by the International Association for Society for Studying of Pain, the IASP, after 41 years, they changed the definition to strongly emphasize that emotional pain, I'm paraphrasing, it is not, so pain is not just physical, but emotional pain can mimic that of tissue damage and injury when it's not. So it's not one or the other. So, and that's the thing I think that David and I are bridging, that it's such a pleasure to have a physician, a well-trained, and not just 12 years of practice, but 30 plus years of practice. And so that's what really enticed me with David. He is very clear, he's transparent in his book about himself and his journey. And the definition, he basically highlights it really well, that it's not just physical. We've been hypnotized by the medical community, not because they're bad, but because that's what we knew, much like the world was flat.
Right.
Now we're trying to really revolutionize things, not just in medicine, but in patients. And those who wish to listen to us, that pain is not just physical, it's not psychological, it is the combination of how the whole body works. David, anything else to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, every symptom in your body is created by your body processing the environment. So if you're having cues of safety, you're full of dopamine and growth hormone and nice anti-inflammatory medications. So you feel good, your body's relaxed, your heart rate's slower, and you are safe and you feel safe. That's the body reacting to the environment. Under threat, it's the opposite. You have adrenaline, cortisol, inflammatory markers, increased metabolism, so you feel hypervigilant and alert. Every living creature processes the environment and creates reactions to keep safe and stay alive. So some of them are chemical, some of them are physical, but that's how symptoms are created. So there's really not any such thing as a mind body. I don't use that term anymore. It's just a unit. In other words, this reactions in your body. The nervous system happens to communicate between the cells, but there's two parts to it. One of them is your body or your brain or capacity to process the environment. The other one's actually the environment. So if the environment exceeds your capacity to process it, that's a threat. And you have appropriate symptoms. And when the threat is temporary, you might get a symptom or two. When it's prolonged, you might get an illness. And when it's sustained, you get sick, you get a chronic, severe disease. And in fact, chronic stress has been shown to kill people early. So this is a physiological process in response to the environment, not, quote, psychological. That being said, the psychological input's a big deal because your thoughts and emotions are as much of a threat as a physical threat. So that's where, so that's what's happening in our world, as you know. The surgeons sort of just throw people into your lap and say, well, take care of this as a psychological. And when I started about Les, again, he actually figured this out way before I did, because you worked with Dr. I mean, you used Dr. Porges' theories way before I even knew about the guy, right?
Grad school, yes, starting back.
Yeah, just rub it in a little bit.
So can I unpack this just a second? So there's the model, like there's a car that's broken, the body is broken, you go in and you fix it, the widget, and then you send people off. And that's a model. Then the other model is, well, if that doesn't work, it's a mental thing, it's a psychological thing. We're going to send you to a psychologist and they'll undo you. And what you're recommending is that it's neither, that the body and the mind, which is one system, is constantly in communication with its environment, and that pain can be the result of a structural problem, or it could be a way, an expression of how we interact with our environment. And the reason that this is important is that a person actually has control, has resources to resolve it. So, because in the medical model and the psychological model, the person doesn't really have control, can't really influence it. But what you're suggesting is that you actually, there are resources that we can pull from to help our pain.
Right. I mean, the body heals itself. I mean, if the body didn't have the capacity to heal, there would not be a human species, right? Okay. So what we're doing in medicine, and Les, you can add on to this, is that we have the person and their inherent coping skills based on their background, their childhood, their current situation, lack of sleep, et cetera. And you have the environment. So in medicine right now, we're not allowed to talk to our patients. So we don't know the patient, we don't know their coping skills, we don't know who they are as a person, and we certainly don't know their environment. So it's that interaction that creates the symptoms. So in medicine, we're treating these symptoms out here, but the root cause is this interaction between the person and the environment. And so the basic thing in medicine I've been advocating, and so has Les for a long time, you could completely solve the healthcare crisis with one intervention. And it is quadrupling or tripling the reimbursement you spend for physicians and providers to talk to their patients. We don't know who you are. You don't know me. I don't know you. Right. We don't take the time. So how do you fix something where there's no time? So again, we're treating symptoms out here. It's like trying to put out an oil well fire with a fire hose, and it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work.
David, I wanted to add something here for the audience, because we've said a lot in between the past few minutes. And one of the things I like to do with my patients, and anytime I do a presentation, is to simplify and keep simplifying as best as we can. And the goal here is David had mentioned it already, is that what is pain? It's basically the nervous system on defense. In one breath, let me just say that. What's that mean? Well, the nervous system is meant to keep us alive. So it's in service of your survival. That's one thing I wanted the audience to know. And the second thing I wanted the audience to know, based on what David and the comments that you had made, really very appropriate in the sense that your biography, who you were, where you were, whatever circumstances, good, bad, ugly, funny, however your nervous system was exposed to it growing up and throughout your adulthood, your biography gets translated into your biology. Right. So in a sense, when we are having chronic pain, I always like to go back, and David does this too in his book, is like, what happened at the time of that insult of your injury? I've had patients wake up, and David, you can add to this. I've had patients who wake up and they could never bend their legs again. I've had patients who wake up with diffuse body pain. I've had a patient who slip and fall and never recover again until they start working with us. The point here is we sometimes have our nervous system recalibrated through chronic life stressors. And at the time of injury or after surgery or a car accident, a slip and fall, a life pressure, your nervous system heightens up and sensitizes, and it never comes down. And people go looking for the holy grail to great physicians and injections and this. It's not that it's not wrong, it's wrong to do that. It's that we might be treating something else that's not there, and it's usually short-lived or creates other problems. And so David discovered this along his practice. And again, what I wanted to emphasize there is this: when you've tried a variety of merry-go-rounds of medical solutions and you've forked out more than $40,000+ in 1 year, time to ask yourself, how's that working for you?
Fair enough. So I would love to bring into the room Dr. Stephen Porges, which David mentioned, and you mentioned, I think by name, the Polyvagal Theory. And I wanted to ask you, what does that mean? And what is revolutionary about this approach? Why is this approach, your philosophy, different and going to change how we see medicine and pain?
Yeah. David,
so listen, since you're only 30 years ahead of me, I'll let you answer that question.
That's absolutely, and I want you to join me there, David. It's about co-regulation, right? That's
Right.
a polyvagal term. So it's an inside joke. All right, so what is the polyvagal? And it sounds very scary, and at first it does sound scary, but it's really speaking to Stephen Porges, who discovered that the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve in the body, and basically it's a long nerve that wanders, and vagus in Latin means the wanderer. And so it wanders throughout all the major organs. And so what Porges discovered is that this long nerve is very important in influencing the rest and digest, the parasympathetic system of the body. We have the stress response, and then we have the rest and digest. Translated into technical words, it means sympathetic and parasympathetic. And what he found out was there's something called the vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, and it actually splits, hence the word poly. And so he discovered that the updated autonomic nervous system, the nervous system ought to be educated to the medical students and everyone else. There are 3 levels of your nervous system. The one being dorsal, which means bottom, and that's when we cannot fight and we cannot flee, we freeze. Have you ever been so frustrated where you couldn't face your reality? May that be chronic pain, a death, getting terminated, having a bill and not having enough money, or having someone leave you. When you cannot fight your reality, you cannot flee from it, you basically just drop. And that's the dorsal effect system. And then we move from the shutdown or freeze to the sympathetic or the fight or flight, the stress. So we've got, freeze, we've got stress or fight or flight. And that's when we get tense and we're fired up and we say acerbic things and we're reactive and we're leaping. We're basically someone who we're not. We're leaping from a place of anger and despair and just frustrated. Just that kind of a reaction. That's the survival mode. That's the middle part. So freeze, scared or stress response, whatever you want to call it. And then the third one, and this is the addition, which I want everyone to know, what Stephen Porges emphasizes. There's something called, the third level is called the ventral vehicle. So the most primitive part that grew in our nervous system was the dorsal system, the sympathetic system, and then the newest one is called the ventral system. Think of caveman days. If you were frowning, you were an enemy. And if you heard a growl, a smile makes the nervous system feel safe. So, when David smiles, I get all warm and fuzzy, and when he hears me laugh.
I hate surgeons don't smile. That's my theme. Surgeons don't smile.
Dave, you're the unique one.
Okay.
And so the third level is basically the ventral vagal system. In simple manner, less jargon, it's the social connection system. This is why when we're all smiling, and I have David and I run groups, and I love to be goofy in my groups as we are here, it creates a sense of safety that it's okay to be me. And even if you're crying, and we can kind of safely experience what we're experiencing and get that regulation from someone who is not going to judge us, put us down, shame us, or dismiss us, the nervous system seems to heal. In summary, the polyvagal says when a balanced nervous system gets there, it creates health, growth, and restoration, and healing is the end result.
Okay, so why is that revolutionary in the medical system? I mean, you have the summit has gathered, I mean, it's an incredibly distinguished group of people coming to the summit who are presenting from all disciplines, but they're coming together because they're on the cusp of something new. So what is that new? Why is that
Dave, you can take
wild?
this, the connection.
I'll take this one. So here's the deal. Each specialist, each discipline is incredibly smart. And there's about 5 geniuses on this roundtable, and I'm not one of them. Dr. Aria is one of them. But there's a Dr. Clausen, Dr. Porges, Dr. Ray Bunnage, and some incredibly bright people there. Some sort of conductor of this orchestra. And it's fascinating because each system is incredibly deep in their own field, but they're not talking to each other. And so there's no cross-fertilization happening. And my mantra for 25 years has been, look, let's take my book Back in Control. I'm just presenting in an organized manner effective treatments. In other words, let's implement what we know. So the data shows that only 10% of surgeons are actually acknowledging the data. Or there's wonderful research that takes place, but nothing is changed in the clinical practice. So our goal is to bring this deep basic science research into clinical practice. And then what's happened, it's our January meeting is going to be a fourth year medical student who has had chronic pain. She's had a lot of success with the project between the book and the roundtable and this thing called the Doc Journey. And she's blown away because not one bit of this was taught in medical school, nothing. So what the polyvagal theory has done is allowed us to interpret this processing of the environment versus the human organism. And so it allows us to organize the body's response in terms of fight, flight, freeze, or faint. And by organizing our thinking in this regards, we actually know the state of the immune system, we know the state of the metabolism, we know the state of the cortex in the top part of the brain. We know about the communication system. So what's happening and I'll let Les talk about sort of the clinical application of this, but by understanding how the body responds to the environment through the lens of the autonomic nervous system, which the polyvagal theory defines, completely transformed the way I talk to patients and explain things. Like these breathing techniques, of which Les has been teaching us a lot about. So, as a surgeon going breathing, whatever, right? I mean, EMDR, whatever. But what we now know is that when we use Les's techniques, that we're directly stimulating the vagus nerve, which is anti-inflammatory, which we know actually anxiety and chronic pain are inflammatory disorders. Because when your tissues are inflamed, you've actually doubled the nerve conduction and you feel the pain more. When you calm down the nervous system, you cut the nerve conduction in half and the pain goes away. So when you asked me about my practice, the last 5 years, I had even surgical patients going to pain-free without surgery. So it wasn't I quit practice, I put myself out of business. So the last 5 years, last 2 years particularly, I was operating less than 5% of my patients. So you can't make a living doing that. So the only reason I made a living because I was dealing with infected spines from the drug addiction crisis, which I don't feel good about that, but that's how I made a living, was being on call and taking care of emergently infected spines. But for an elective spine practice, I couldn't make a living. People kept truly getting better without the surgery.
Through Les's the systems that Les promotes and teaches.
Well, just the whole process, it's the whole process. I mean, he does much more than just breathing. I mean, I guess I should let you tell. I guess I should let you tell people what you do.
No, I think I wanted to come back to what Anna's thing is David. I think you're right. What you're really communicating is this whole summit is basically to teach patients that it is almost, I do not know of any single living human being, unless you have a spaceship and you're purple from Mars or something like that. If you're under threat, there is no way for you to heal. I have patients who are phenomenal yoga masters and where they teach meditation. I have phenomenal psychiatrists that specialize in physicians for whatever reason. And my point here is this: I have so many wonderful people who are Christians or Buddhists, or they just have this deep spiritual, and for whatever reason, they're not getting better. They're not getting better because their life chronically stressed about something. And so what the summit is showing you, look, when you're under threat, there is almost nearly impossible to heal. You might have good days and bad days, but what we want to do is completely put you into recovery. And it's going to take some work to go from threat to safety. The summit
there's also another major factor is that medicine, almost 95% of medicine is focused on structure.
Mm-hmm.
And this is about, so what we're really trying to convey is the body's physiology.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, and what Les is brilliant at, which I'm excited to hear about his tools. Can you tell us the story about, you said you had one person with 10 years of chronic pain and using your biofeedback device, how in like 15 minutes you popped them right out of it?
Oh yeah. I had, yes, there are several. David and I share lots of stories, and I think the last time we hung out was like 4 hours talking about how he did his and I did mine. So it's kind of neat, like swapping candy or something on a Halloween day.
Sure, marbles.
So one of the things is, let me just share something really simple, and I think it's a good example. Is I had a patient who had severe abdominal pain, and a young gal around her 70s, and had been suffering with this. It came on all insidiously over a period of years. and had spent over 100,000 plus from allopathic meds. There's a time and place for medicines and interventions and things like that, and even place on antidepressants. Now, all I did in that session was kind of create a space for her, and I asked her if her stomach had an emotion, what would it be? And she looked at me, she goes, what? She goes, what's that got to do with it? And I said, just play with me. So I did a little bit of breath work with her. And I used biofeedback to kind of show you, because sometimes you may not believe that you are actually on defense. And I can see it in my machine when your heart rate and your breathing is off. And I kind of create a coherency, a sense of safety that you can see. And then I walk you through. And ultimately, when I got her all settled down with some breath work and just a little light meditation, I asked her, what is the emotion that she is struggling to get rid of? And she said, I'm disgusted with myself. And when we walked through a few of those memories that she had, in that moment, she said before, by the time it was about 45 minutes later or so, her pain was 8 out of 10. It dropped down to about a 1 or a 2. And then I got an email from her 24 hours later, it was gone. So what I'm trying to say is that might be a unique situation, but I do not wish to mislead people saying
But it's not that unusual either.
It's true. And
right. I mean, so here's the deal. So you would say, okay, well, that obviously is psychological because it went away so quickly. That's not true. When you give patient cues of safety, it changes the body's inflammatory response. Okay. So we go from inflammatory markers to anti-inflammatory markers. Your body chemistry changes dramatically. So this is a physiological process. And what Les has done so well with these different monitors, he's not monitoring psychology, he's monitoring the body's physiology. Am I correct in that, Les?
That's well said, David.
Right. Okay.
Right. So what I'm actually a little reactive to right now, unless you can coach me on this one a little bit, but patients in chronic pain get labeled badly. Les and I both know these labels really well. Lingerers, lazy, drug seekers, all sorts of stuff. Nobody likes to be labeled. The doctors label the patients. Nobody really likes that. So just because the doctors can't find a quote structural cause, they want to sort of blame the patient. So the problem is that it's a physiological issue. 95% of symptoms at least are based on the body's physiology. So now medicine has come up with a new term, which I think is the final insult to labeling, called medically unexplained symptoms. And your body's full of cortisol, adrenaline, inflammatory markers, everything's wrong. And you have physical symptoms based on this information. So medicine right now has used the word medically unexplained symptoms, which to me is sort of the final insult in this whole picture. So I actually quit my surgical practice because of this, because I was seeing 3 to 5 patients every week, badly damaged by spine surgery. And I was seeing hundreds of patients going to pain-free using the approaches that Les and I use, but also the other clinicians in our group. So we're trying to say to the world with this conference, let's say, look, chronic pain is a responsive environment. It has a horrible impact on people's lives. You have to listen to what's going on. This is not about some belief system unless Aria or David Hanscom. It's simply understanding the nature of the problem, then using the correct principles to solve it. And it's incredibly solvable. So if you have the wrong diagnosis and everything's structural, it's never solvable. The chance of getting better with spine surgery with back pain is 22%, 22% chance of success. With engagement in the processes that Les and I are talking about, it's a probability you're probably going to get better. Huge difference, no risk, minimal cost. And what I think what both Les and I are excited about, not only are people out from the burden of chronic pain, they're also out from under the burden of anxiety and anger, but they start to thrive at a level that they've never experienced before. So I get very energized by my practice. I get excited about patients doing better. It's not an ego thing. I went through 15 years of chronic pain myself, so I feel privileged and honored to help people out. I think Les feels the same way. But to take somebody with no hope and watch them come alive and just take off like a rocket, it's amazing experience to watch.
That's incredible. Can you two give us some color and some detail about what are some of those practices that clinicians can incorporate in their practices and that people can be aware of are options for them that help create that de-inflammation and support the vagus nerve?
Well, David, you want to go first or shall I go?
I'll let you fire away. I'm such a gentleman.
You are a gentleman, absolutely. So a couple of things here, just to keep it really practical. whenever someone experiences physical pain, chronic pain, persistent pain, whatever the label we use, when they feel that, one of the first things we do, which is evolutionary, is survival, is to, how do I get rid of that sensation for today? How do I get rid of it? And so when you start to push and pull, like you're trying to push the feeling away, that physical sensation, whether it's burning, stabbing, radiating, doesn't quite matter. Or maybe you're feeling anxious. And so when you're trying to push away a sensation in the body, you just send messages of danger to your nervous system. So one of the biggest and simplest things I teach patients is breath work. Now, I'll be the first to say I didn't believe much into it. I was trained in it in 11 different relaxation techniques, trained in a variety of things. And I got to tell them, like, yeah, just practice your breath work. But when you really practice breath work, I do a technique in the morning where I settle myself down in my body before my feet hits the ground. And it's simple breath work. It's a gentle breath. There are fancy names to it: coherence breath, the ultimate breathing breath. It doesn't quite matter what kind of breath. When you can actually connect with your breath in a sense that's easy without effort, it sends the message to the nervous system that you're safe. So breath work, we found out that when your breath is irregular, it activates the brainstem into a sense of defensiveness. So breath work is not just breath work. It is a message to your brainstem: honey, we're safe. Go ahead and settle down. That's
And
one.
Dr. Aria, what time of the day do you do that breath work?
Like 4 a.m. So, but that's the first thing I do when my eyes open. I basically put my hands on my belly, and then I just feel my breath. And I do 15 breaths. Not that anyone has to do what I do, but I basically instruct my patients exactly that. Breath work is very important. It is the vagal brake to the nervous system. It's when we're driving because of pain and stress, and if you're not putting the nervous system in recovery, you're just piling up dirty dishes in your body, so to speak.
So Anna, what I'd like to do for a second is just provide some resources. So Les has a series of YouTube videos called, how do you spell your term, mindfulness, M-Y?
Yeah, it's with the Y, MYNDFULNESS, yeah.
So he's a wonderful series on YouTube on how to do this breath work.
Fantastic.
And I have to admit that one of probably the biggest entry points is the breath work, because it calms down the inflammatory response. Then people can think and engage. And if you're inflamed and frustrated, you can't reason correctly. So I think the breath work is a great starting point. I'm also going to point out that the reason why I wrote the book Back in Control is just a framework of breaking pain down into its different parts. So there's 3 parts to solving pain. One is awareness. So you become awareness of the nature of chronic pain. You become aware of the principles behind the solutions. And you become aware of your own circumstances in relation to this whole process, or education. The second step is there's multiple variables in chronic pain. So the book breaks your pain into different parts. Everybody has a different spectrum. So once you see your 5 or 8 variables that affect you, you have to treat every one of them simultaneously. In other words, everything works a little bit in chronic pain, but nothing works in isolation. Then the last part is that chronic pain is complicated, got lots of different parts to it, but each person is incredibly complicated. The only person that can solve the problem is the patient. So once you teach people the tools to actually negotiate their own body's chemistry, it's just a matter of time. And then so you're reprogramming the brain, you're causing the brain to change structure. I use the term neuroplasticity, which means you're stimulating the brain to grow different cells, different connections, but you're like creating a different virtual desktop on your computer, but the new desktop doesn't have pain. And so I have one gentleman who had 27 surgeries in 20 years. He's been pain-free now for 5 years. He's doing fine. He's great. In fact, he feels better now than he did when he was 30 years old before all this started. So I do not think that was possible, unless you have this patient with the phantom limb pain. Can you tell us about that really quickly?
Yeah, so I think it comes back down to what you said is, that sense of safety and awareness is basically learning to be able to safely recognize what's showing up in your body. A case that David and I shared is a patient who had phantom limb pain. And let me just say this to you, he was not the average patient. He was basically someone with a very rough background. I mean, so much so that in my 16 years of practice, I actually kind of held my breath unknowingly when I walked in and saw who I was dealing with. I was scared. My nervous system was scared. But let me tell you, the end result. He read David's book. I worked with him on a regular basis. He's phantom limb. Just to let you know, he was addicted to multiple substances. There was a history of domestic violence. Moving forward, 6 months into treatment, his phantom limb pain is completely resolved. He is now studying to be a chemical dependency counselor. He is back. He has straightened out his life. He is just 360. I mean, it's just, everything is so different. And the reason we bring this up is because he was basically put aside by physicians, and it's over 6 physicians that basically said, you're just an addict. Well, he was an addict because he was trying to cope with his emotions and his physical pain. And once you settle the emotions down, it's easier to work with the physical pain aspect. And that is why this whole summit basically kind of has a breath of that, that threat, the awareness and safety. Is you need to know what's threatening you, and bringing that awareness and how do I wish to navigate this, because what you're doing is not working, and then to create a sense of safety to basically, what am I doing on a daily basis to rehabilitate my nervous system? But if you don't have a life problem that you're trying to solve, meaning that people seem to do read the book, do the exercise, do the meditations, but they don't seem to get out of pain because there's something they're not dealing with, and that will heighten the nervous system. So with that said, I think you're right, David, is, awareness, threat, but the message is safety to the nervous system.
Right.
Right. So I want to acknowledge that there are some questions that are coming in on Facebook. And before we go there, I want to just connect a few dots that I heard. One is that that we have control, right? That if we're being labeled, if we're being told that we're not solvable, our pain is insolvable, that is not true, that there is control, and that you both, along with the members of the summit, are communicating ways of understanding and resolving the pain from a self-empowered place. So that's number one. Number two is that we live in a constant state of stress. It's just life, modern life, right? So it would behoove all of us who have the gumption to take that power to learn some of these skills, because our life inevitably will bump us in to some type of pain that we can resolve ourselves. So this state of chronic stress is everybody's reality, but there are some populations that are more stressed than others, right? So if your life is more stressed than should be, then this message is particularly for you. Or if you are a clinician who works with people who live in a constant state of stress, then the summit is really for you, right? So connecting a few dots there.
Right.
So with that said, I'd love to honor some people who have put some questions into the room. Okay, ready? The first one.
David, this one's for you.
So what do you think about the ego skew method of living without pain? I have found it useful for hip pain. Am I saying that word right? Ego skew?
Do you know the technique, Les?
Yeah, I'm very familiar. If you're a golfer, you should speak to it. So.
Well, I know that. Let me just say something. I don't know the technique. One, I have to comment on one way or the other. But here's the key. Remember, there's awareness, treating every aspect simultaneously. The patient takes control. Every person finds out what works for them. So the Glasgow method may not work for me at all, but may work great for him. So the key is you have control. You make the choice. And if he's found it helpful, that's fantastic. If somebody wants to see Dr. Aria instead of David Hanscom, that's fine. I'm serious about that. So whatever you connect with is what should happen. There's a person we have a Q&A every Tuesday and Thursday of about 30 to 40 people. And I have a woman who's had 4 years of pain. She had a pretty darn big spine surgery that she didn't need. And she saw a friend of mine back east, Dr. Howard Schumer, who I think is a magician as far as helping people feel safe. He's one of my mentors. And so she has some success with him. She's been working through the doc project, but she wasn't breaking through. And he basically told her to look at the pain like a bully. and just talk to this boy and say, is that all? Is that all you got? Is that all? Is that all you got? And I swear to God, she's been pain-free now for a couple of days. And there's a long story behind that, but if you're afraid of the pain, it's going to torture you.
Right.
If you walk right into it, remember, it's interpretation of your brain, and the fear, Dr. Teddy Roosevelt saying fear itself. Well, it's true. So you're afraid of the pain. Guess what? You're going to become more inflamed and make the pain worse. Anyway, so I'm saying it's a long way of saying whatever connection that you have that works, provided it doesn't have a high risk to it, like spine surgery, is great.
Great. So the next comment is somewhat related. It's a person writes, I have found CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, to be very helpful to me in handling both my chronic pain and my emotional state, which was shattered over 10 years, which was shattered by 10 years of living in chronic pain. So another comment about another, am I right? CBT is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Comment on that, Les?
Yeah, and just, yes, absolutely. I used to be a cognitive behavioral therapist. I was trained very well by some wonderful mentors. And it wasn't until, so cognitive behavioral therapy says, change the talk in your head and you will get better, and do differently. I use a form of cognitive behavioral therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is so the simplicity of it, it's mindful-based interventions and it's value-based. For example, when I have a very difficult thought, I know it's my inner critic. I can step back, pause, and ask myself, this is of what service is this of? And so cognitive behavioral therapy says, get in there and challenge those thoughts. Now that works great. Long story short, this is majority of my patients have tried cognitive behavioral therapy and some like it. And I have another larger group that seems to prefer acceptance commitment therapy because I'm not going to argue with something that is of no value with me. I'm going to move towards what's important, no matter how I feel, think, and experience. Values like what's important to me, my family, my work, my spirituality. So ACT is a third wave, a new, and just think of it, it's gone through plastic surgery and something new and improved.
I mean, don't they call it third wave cognitive behavior
third wave CBT. So yes, it's absolutely great. The important part here is this: some form of evidence-based mental skills are required part of your recovery process. So awesome.
That's great. And another similar comment, so that says, I've improved my chronic pain with mindfulness,
Nice.
medication, but I have hit a plateau. What would you suggest?
Dr. Aria.
Sure, absolutely.
It's sort of serious, actually, but.
So one of the things I do, I get tons of patients like this, wonderful human beings like this, and that's one that's very normal. I too went through that. What you want to do and ask yourself is, how is this pain serving me? The reason you hit a plateau, one of millions of reasons, but the most common thing I've noticed in my 16 years of practice is this, is that it's serving a purpose. When you find the cause of its service, you will let the house of cards fall. Point in case, I saw a surgeon with level herniated disc from an accident. And long story short of this is he said, I hit a plateau. And it wasn't until I recognized that he was pissed off that one of his kids, he's a good looking surgeon, tall, they're always big and good looking, like David. And so, and he was mad that his kid was challenged with some mental and physical challenges. And he was harboring that anger. And when we broke that, his pain shifted and completely went into recovery. So my point to that, the plateau, look for something that may be serving you. And it's often an emotion you don't want to deal with or a life problem.
So I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, but I will say every person to the person is healed. Every one of them. It's, they get stuck. I had a huge conversation today with one of my roundtable people. Every person that heals or every person that gets stuck, it's always around anger every time. And the research shows that 90% of people in chronic pain have held on to the injury or situation that caused the problem in the first place, 90%. And the problem is when you keep that link going to the past, that person might as well be right there in front of you because that link is there. The reactions are the same. And of course, and they get stronger with time, not better. In other words, if you experience the link over 30 years, it gets stronger. If you suppress it for 30 years, it gets even stronger. So things don't heal with time.
Mm.
I mean, I know people think, well, you're going to heal with time. It actually is only true if you put tools in place to
Yeah.
cause healing over time. But
Mhm.
if you just try to ignore things or suppress things, things get worse with time. But it's always around anger and forgiveness.
So, David, you said something to me in a previous conversation that unexpressed emotions were so much more damaging than expressed emotions,
Correct.
right? So unexpressed emotions is a what would I say, like a toxin. It's an ailment. It will create ailments.
Right.
Sometimes we're trained
That's,
to like keep everything quiet and pull together and don't express, but that's not true, is it?
I'm sure to let Les answer this, but I'll just say one thing that what got me in deep trouble. Why I was in chronic pain for 15 years. What got me in deep trouble was I was incredible at suppressing stress.
Yeah.
So I would only allow myself a range of emotions that was about this wide. So I became a major complex spine surgeon. And so my nickname was the brick. That was my name. I thought that was a compliment. It's actually not a compliment at all. It did cost me a marriage. So that narrow range of emotions is a problem. But here's the kicker. You actually can't feel good until you allow yourself to feel bad. Right?
So I think, David, that's a simple way of saying is what you don't express gets impressed, and get better at feeling to feel better.
Right.
Say that again.
Get better at feeling to feel better.
To get better at feeling to feel better. And what was the statement before that?
What you don't express gets impressed in the body.
Okay, fantastic. So you two have shared some great tools for us already. So I want to just highlight that there is a series on YouTube that is Les leading breath work and mindfulness. Okay,
Of mindfulness and meditations and explaining. Today, I'll be putting out something called the inner critic, how to work with it. So
fantastic. So let's all go to YouTube. And then David's book is invaluable and it totally unpacks the pain process and provides some supportive methods and systems. And now, can we drop into the summit? Because one of the things as I was looking at the summit, there's 21 speakers who across a Friday to Sunday will all share. It caught my attention. Some of them are talking about forgiveness. Some of them are talking about compassion. Some of them are talking about what I call narrative medicine, but writing and journaling. And then you also have neurosurgeons and neuroscientists, psychologists. So this seems like a very different composition of presenters. Can you give us a little bit of a preview about what people can expect?
Well, I'll just say one thing is that we really want to try to convey this newness of knowledge that we're learning and how excited we are about it. Because that's the whole key. We have these seemingly disparate disciplines, but guess what? We're all dealing with the human body. And I don't like the word holistic medicine because medicine is holistic. It has to be holistic for it to be medicine.
Mm.
So we've gotten specialized. And so the bottom line is all of us are looking at the same person from a different angle. And that's what's been so exciting is that we have found out how solvable it is by comparing notes. And there is a completely different energy coming out of this than a traditional pain summit. Is that a fair statement, Les?
yeah, I think that's very good. And we just want to bring some scientists around the world who basically, because we want to base everything we're speaking about is evidence-based. So it's been
Right.
shown in studies. So day one shows you about, the brain system, like Aria will be speaking, and people will be surprised. And physicians don't realize this. There are 4 phases before we go from acute to subacute to chronic pain. And he points out the factors and how the brain literally shifts real estate. So you get to learn that, and you don't get to hear it. It'll hit the medicine probably 20 years, 30 years from now. And so the goal here is day one is to let's start at the basics, the nervous system and the brain. And then day 2 is about awareness. Like what are you when you're feeling this overwhelming, what tools do you have specifically based on science that's been effective? And the last day is about let's show you some additional tools on how to create safety, whether it's forgiveness, expressive writing, whether it's breath work or group work. We want to show you that there's a way to shift the nervous system. And in that paradigm, there's healing.
By the
Fantastic.
way, this is not new knowledge.
Mhm.
This has been in the medical literature for over 30 years.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure why we've overlooked it because it's right there. So it's not like we're discovering something new. We're actually uncovering what already is. And then what's new about it is that we've all everybody in the group has come to the same conclusions in a way, which I find exciting. But we're just taking stuff that's already there and putting it together in a way that's more understandable. But this data has been around for a long time.
Fantastic. I think it's important that it's evidence-based. I think that's very assuring to the clinicians that we're inviting to this summit. It's also assuring to the common person to know that it's not just positive thinking, that this is tried and true and applied and works. So I want to re-invite all of our audience members to know that on January 22nd to the 24th, in about a month, there is this fantastic summit that takes place between Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that Les just outlined. The title of it is called Solving Chronic Pain, A New Pathway to Relief. I was stunned by the quality of the presenters that you have gathered. It is really incredible. And I have a feeling that you are not done with this conversation, that this is one of many summits, many gatherings, much of one of many other expressions of you reaching out into the public, into the clinical world and to the public world to share a really empowering message that we need more and more today. So with that said, I want to honor our time. We've had a really wonderful conversation. We will make sure to include your website link, both of your website links, your YouTube link, and make your information available to as many people as possible. And opencenter.org is the URL to get more information on this.
And I
David?
just want to say one more thing. I did evolve a new process that we're releasing last week called the Doc Journey. And
Okay.
so people have been better with the book and the website, but the Doc Journey is a very straight line process, which is much clearer so I'm watching people get better faster than I've ever seen. But the Doc Journey reflects a much deeper understanding of the process. And that's why I'm so excited about it. But that can be accessed at thedocjourney.com.
Thedocjourney.com.
Right.
Beautiful. Thank you. Anything else before we say goodbye? It's been such a pleasure to chat with you.
We want to thank Open Center for
Yes,
hosting this.
definitely.
And David, let me publicly say thanks, but it's always a pleasure to hang out with David anytime. So
Yeah, we have a good time. We really do have a good time. And then Les wanders by our house, and my wife and I, we talk for a long time. It's fun.
there you go. And thank everyone for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, everybody. We will see you at the New York Open Center. See you on January 22nd. Thank you, Les, and thank you, David, and continue the wonderful work. Okay, blessings. Bye.